A former casino floor manager just revealed something that casinos have spent millions of dollars trying to keep quiet. And what he's sharing could completely change the way you think about gambling. For the past 15 years, this man worked his way up from pit supervisor to floor manager at three different major casinos. And he's finally speaking out about the sophisticated profiling systems that track your every move. According to internal documents he's seen, casinos can generate up to 37 different data points about you within your first 15 minutes of play. That's not just about how much you're betting. They're building a complete psychological profile of who you are as a gambler before you've even finished your first drink. And it all starts the moment you touch your very first slot machine. Profiling method number one. First, machine choice analysis. Here's what most people don't understand. The casino isn't just watching how much money you're spending. They're analyzing which machine you walk toward first, how long you hesitate before sitting down, whether you look around to see if anyone's watching, what denomination you choose, and even how you physically interact with the buttons versus the screen. Every single one of these behaviors gets fed into a system that categorizes you into one of several player types. Are you a recreational gambler who's here for entertainment? Are you someone showing early signs of problem gambling behaviors? Or are you potentially a high-value player who might be worth significant marketing investment? The system makes these determinations faster than you can imagine, and once you're categorized, everything else the casino does is designed to extract maximum value based on exactly what type of player you are. Our source, we'll call him our Michael, spent 7 years in casino management before he couldn't stomach the manipulation anymore. He described sitting in surveillance rooms with marketing teams, watching footage of players entering the casino floor. They weren't looking for cheaters. They were studying behavior patterns. Michael explained how the marketing analyst would point out specific tells that indicated different player types. A person who walks directly to a machine without looking around shows confidence and familiarity, probably a regular player worth tracking closely. Someone who wanders slowly, reading the machine titles, touching several different screens before committing, that's typically a recreational player or a tourist. These players get categorized differently in the system, and they'll receive completely different marketing approaches going forward. But here's where it gets really calculated. Michael shared a specific case that stuck with him. There was a woman, probably in her mid-50s, who walked onto the floor and immediately touched a penny slot machine. She stood there for almost 2 minutes, her hand literally resting on the machine, just looking at it. Then she walked away and sat down at a dollar denomination machine, 3 rows over. The surveillance team flagged this behavior immediately. Why would someone touch a penny machine but play dollars? According to Michael, this pattern suggests someone who wants to gamble conservatively but can't resist the pull of higher stakes. It indicates internal conflict about money. Within a week, this woman received specifically designed promotional mailers offering her bonus play at the exact bet levels she'd been using, timed to arrive on the days she typically visited. She had no idea that her moment of hesitation at that penny machine had revealed so much about her psychological relationship with gambling. Profiling method number 2. Bet progression tracking. The system goes even deeper than just observing your first choice. Casinos track your bet progression from the very beginning. If you start at $2.25, then move to $3, then jump to $5 within your first 30 minutes. The computer is analyzing your escalation pattern. It's calculating what they call your pain threshold, which is essentially the point at which losses will cause you to either quit or dramatically increase your bets in an attempt to recover. Former employees report that this pain threshold becomes the foundation of your entire marketing profile. It determines everything from what comp offers you'll receive to how floor staff are trained to interact with you. But this is just the beginning of how deeply casinos profile every single person who walks through their doors. What they do once you actually insert that player's card is going to shock you. Profiling method number 3, player's card data collection. And if you think choosing your first machine reveals a lot about you, wait until you hear what happens the moment you slide that player's card into the slot. This is where casino profiling shifts from observation to comprehensive data collection. And according to a former casino marketing director we'll call Jennifer, What gets tracked goes far beyond anything most players could imagine. Jennifer spent 9 years managing player development databases for two different casino corporations, and she's finally speaking out about the sheer scope of information that gets captured, analyzed, and weaponized every single time you use your loyalty card. The moment that card registers in the system, the casino's computer begins logging a cascade of data points. Obviously, they're tracking your wins and losses, that's expected. But they're also recording your exact time of entry, what machine you chose, your average bet size, your bet variance, how many spins you're playing per minute, how long you play before taking breaks, whether those breaks correlate with wins or losses, and even whether you're drinking alcohol based on beverage service records linked to your card. According to insider reports, the major casino management systems used across the industry track an average of 15 to 20 distinct behavioral metrics per card swipe, and these metrics get analyzed in real time to determine how the casino should respond to you. Jennifer shared a story that perfectly illustrates how this works in practice. There was a regular player named Robert who'd been visiting the same casino for about 8 months. He always played the same type of machine, always bet roughly the same amount, and his pattern was remarkably consistent. He'd show up every Friday evening, play for about 90 minutes, and whether he won or lost, he'd cash out and leave. The casino system had been tracking all of this, building what Jennifer called a predictive profile. Then one Friday, Robert had a particularly bad session. He lost about $400 in just under an hour, which was faster than his normal loss rate. He cashed out and left. The very next Tuesday, Robert received an email offer for $50 in free play, valid only that upcoming Friday. He returned that Friday, used his free play, and ended up staying for 3 hours instead of his usual 90 minutes. He lost an additional $600 beyond the free 50 they'd given him. This wasn't coincidence. Jennifer explained that the casino's algorithm had identified Robert's loss that previous Friday as exceeding his normal pain threshold. The system calculated that he'd left frustrated, which meant he was statistically likely to return sooner than his normal weekly pattern if given an incentive. The $50 in free play wasn't generosity. It was a calculated investment based on Robert's established lifetime value to the casino. They knew his average loss per visit, they knew his frequency, and they knew that a $50 incentive at precisely the right moment would likely generate several $100s in additional play. Former employees report that these triggered bonus offers have names in the internal systems, things like loss recovery incentive or premature exit bonus, and they are deployed automatically based on algorithms that have been refined over years of testing. Profiling method number 4, bet deviation monitoring. But here's where the profiling becomes even more insidious, and this is something Jennifer said she found increasingly uncomfortable with as she advanced in her role. The system doesn't just track your wins and losses in isolation, it's specifically watching for what's called bet deviation, which is when you suddenly change your betting pattern in ways that indicate emotional decision-making, rather than rational play. When you've been betting $2.25 per spin for 45 minutes, and then you suddenly jump to $6.75 per spin, the casino's computer flags this immediately as a potential tilt situation. According to documentation from former employees, floor managers in many casinos receive real-time notifications on their tablets or headsets when players enter what the system identifies as chase mode. Here's a specific example that Michael, our former floor manager, corroborated from his own experience. There was a middle-aged man named David who was playing a Buffalo-style game at modest bet levels. David had been playing for about 30 minutes when he hit a bonus round that paid only $12 on a 225 bet, which he clearly felt should have paid more based on his body language. Michael watched through the surveillance system as David immediately increased his bet to $6.75 for the next spin. Within 90 seconds, a cocktail waitress appeared at David's machine offering a complimentary drink. David hadn't ordered anything, he hadn't signaled anyone, but the system had flagged his bet deviation, categorized him as experiencing frustration and entering a chase pattern, and automatically dispatched service to his location. This isn't speculation. According to documentation that former employees have shared, major casino management systems include specific protocols for responding to bet deviation events. The logic is simple and ruthlessly effective. A player who's increasing bets out of frustration is a player who's likely to lose significantly more money than usual, but they're also a player at higher risk of having a negative experience that might cause them to stop visiting entirely. The solution is to make that player feel valued and attended to during this vulnerable moment. A free drink, a friendly interaction with staff, maybe a casual comment from a floor supervisor about how this machine has been running hot lately. These small interventions keep the player engaged in gambling while they're in an emotional state that leads to poor decision making. It's customer service and psychological manipulation wrapped into one seamless system. But wait until you hear what happens when you actually hit a significant win. The casino's response to your jackpots reveals just how sophisticated this profiling truly becomes. Method number 4 is going to show you that even your biggest wins are being used against you. Profiling method number 5, jackpot response system. And speaking of big wins, here's something that's going to completely change how you view those celebratory moments when you hit a jackpot. What casinos do the instant you win significant money isn't about congratulations. It's about immediate reassessment of your value. And according to Marcus, a former casino host who worked in player development for 6 years, there's an actual protocol that activates the moment you cross certain win thresholds. Marcus called it the jackpot response system. And when he explained how it works, it became clear that your biggest wins are actually some of the most valuable data points the casino collects about you. Here's what happens behind the scenes. The moment you hit a jackpot that requires a hand pay, which federally means anything $1,200 or above, you're not just getting tax paperwork processed. You're being run through an entirely new level of analysis while you're sitting there waiting for slot attendants to verify your win and count out your money. The casino system is pulling your complete gambling history. It's calculating your lifetime wins versus your lifetime losses across every visit you've ever made. It's determining whether this jackpot puts you ahead or still keeps you in the loss column overall. And based on that calculation, it's making real-time decisions about how aggressively to market to you going forward. Former employees report that this reassessment happens within minutes, and the subsequent response from casino hosts is anything but random. Marcus shared a case that perfectly demonstrates how calculated this becomes. There was a woman, probably in her early 60s, who'd been a regular player for about 2 years. She typically played 3 to 4 times per month, usually lost between $150 and $300 per visit, and had never hit anything substantial. Then one Thursday afternoon, she hit a jackpot for $8,500 on a dancing drums machine. She was ecstatic. People gathered around, slot attendants came over with paperwork, and while this was happening, Marcus received an alert on his tablet showing this woman's complete profile. The system had already calculated that despite this $8,500 win, she was still lifetime down approximately $23,000 at that property. The computer had already categorized her as a reinvestment opportunity, which Marcus explained meant she was statistically likely to return the money if given reasons to stay on property. Before this woman had even finished signing her tax forms, Marcus was walking toward her with a specific script in mind. He congratulated her warmly, asked if she'd ever stayed in their hotel tower, and mentioned that he'd love to offer her a complimentary room upgrade for that night if she was interested, plus reservations at their upscale steakhouse. The woman was thrilled. She felt valued and special. She took the room. She had dinner. She went back to the casino floor that same evening and played for 4 more hours. According to the records Marcus could access, she gave back $3,200 of her jackpot that same night. She left the next morning still up overall from the jackpot, but the casino had successfully recovered more than a third of their payout within 12 hours by making her feel like a VIP at precisely the right psychological moment. This is standard protocol according to internal documentation. When you hit a jackpot but you're still lifetime negative to the casino, you become what's internally called a retention priority. The goal isn't to get all your money back immediately. The goal is to keep you on property long enough that probability works in the house's favor. Casinos know that most players who hit significant jackpots experience what researchers call the house money effect, where they feel like they're playing with the casino's money rather than their own. This psychological phenomenon makes people bet more aggressively and take bigger risks than they normally would. According to internal reports that former employees have shared, roughly 73% of jackpot winners give back at least 40% of their winnings within 48 hours if they stay on property. The casino's entire response system is built around exploiting this tendency. Profiling method number 6, session length pattern analysis. But here's what makes this profiling even more sophisticated. And this is something that both Marcus and Jennifer confirmed from their different roles within casino operations. The system doesn't just analyze your wins and losses, it tracks your session length patterns down to the minute, and it uses that information to interrupt you at precisely the moments when you're most likely to leave. Former surveillance operators report that casinos have developed specific algorithms that predict your quit point based on your historical behavior, and they deploy interventions designed to extend your play beyond that natural stopping point. Marcus described how this worked in practice. There was a retired teacher named Patricia who was remarkably consistent in her gambling habits. She visited twice a week, always played for almost exactly 2 hours, and always left regardless of whether she was winning or losing. The system had logged months of this pattern. Then one Tuesday afternoon, Patricia was approaching her typical 2-hour mark. She was at about 1 hour and 50 minutes. Marcus received an alert indicating that a regular player was approaching predicted exit time. He walked over to Patricia's machine just as she was starting to gather her things. He greeted her by name, asked how her session was going, and casually mentioned that he had a complimentary buffet pass that was about to expire and he'd hate to see it go to waste. Would she like it? Patricia accepted gratefully. She went to the buffet. When she returned to the floor, she played for another 75 minutes and lost an additional $340 beyond what she'd already lost in her first session. This wasn't kindness. According to insider reports, this was a session extension protocol, and it's deployed thousands of times per day across major casino properties. The $15 value of that buffet pass generated hundreds of dollars in additional play, and Patricia never realized she'd been specifically targeted at the exact moment the computer predicted she would leave. Former employees report feeling increasingly uncomfortable with how precise these interventions became. The system learns your patterns better than you know them yourself, and it uses that knowledge to keep you gambling longer than you intended. But if you think tracking your session length is manipulative, wait until you hear about the next profiling method. This one actually monitors your emotions through facial recognition technology, and what casinos can determine about your psychological state is going to shock you. Profiling method number 7, facial recognition and emotion monitoring. Now, you might be wondering if casinos actually monitor your facial expressions while you're playing. And according to Craig, a former surveillance manager who oversaw security operations for 8 years at 2 different major properties, the answer is absolutely yes. Craig described sitting in surveillance control rooms equipped with what he called next-generation monitoring systems, cameras that weren't just recording video footage for security purposes, but were actively analyzing players' faces in real time using artificial intelligence-powered emotion recognition software. These systems, which have been deployed in various casinos over the past 5 years, are designed to identify what Craig called micro-expressions, the tiny involuntary facial movements that reveal your true emotional state even when you're trying to maintain composure. The technology works by tracking dozens of points on your face, measuring everything from how much your eyebrows furrow to how often you blink, to whether the corners of your mouth turn downward even slightly. According to internal documentation that Craig had access to, these emotion recognition systems can categorize players into 12 different emotional states, including confidence, excitement, frustration, resignation, anxiety, and what the system labeled as tilt indicators. The software doesn't just identify these emotions, it logs them with timestamps, correlates them with your playing behavior, and feeds that information into your player profile. When the system detects certain emotional patterns, particularly resignation or frustration, sustained over several minutes, It can trigger alerts to floor management suggesting that a player might be reaching a breaking point and could benefit from intervention. Craig shared a specific incident that perfectly illustrates how this technology gets weaponized. There was a man, probably in his late 40s, who'd been playing a Lightning Link machine for about 45 minutes. Craig was reviewing multiple camera feeds when the emotion recognition system flagged this particular player with what it categorized as sustained frustration, transitioning into resignation. The man's facial expression had apparently met the algorithmic criteria for someone who was about to quit. His shoulders had slumped slightly. His blinks had become longer. The micro movements around his eyes indicated what the system interpreted as defeat. Within 3 minutes of this alert being generated, a floor manager approached the man's machine and struck up a friendly conversation. The manager casually mentioned that this particular bank of machines had been hitting bonuses all morning and offered the player a $25 free play voucher as a thank you for his loyalty. The man's entire demeanor changed. He accepted the free play, his posture improved, and he continued playing for another hour. He ultimately lost an additional $470 beyond what he'd already lost before that intervention. This isn't science fiction, and it's not speculation. Craig confirmed that emotion recognition technology is being tested and implemented in various forms across multiple casino properties, though casinos remain extremely quiet about its deployment because they understand how invasive it sounds to the general public. The legal justification, according to former managers, is that this technology is being used for customer service optimization rather than security purposes, which places it in a regulatory gray area that most gaming commissions haven't specifically addressed. The system isn't looking for card counters or cheaters, it's looking for emotional vulnerability, for those precise moments when a player's psychological state makes them most susceptible to interventions that will extend their gambling session. But here's where the profiling gets even more invasive, and this is something that former marketing executives have confirmed from multiple properties. Casinos don't just profile you as an individual, they map your entire social network. If you come to a casino with friends or family members, the system is actively tracking who you're with, building what former employees called social network maps that identify the relationships and influence patterns within your gambling group. Jennifer, our former marketing director, explained that this type of profiling became increasingly sophisticated during her final years in the industry. The way it works is surprisingly straightforward but deeply calculated. When a group of players come to the casino together, and especially if they're all using their players' cards, the system begins logging the social connections. It tracks who sits near whom, who takes breaks together, who celebrates together when someone wins. Over multiple visits, the casino's database builds a comprehensive picture of your social gambling network. But here's the crucial part. The system doesn't treat everyone in the group equally. It specifically identifies who Jennifer called the social hub, or the influencer, which is the person who appears to make decisions that others follow. This might be the person who suggests which machines to try, or who decides when the group should take a dinner break, or who rallies everyone to stay longer. Once the system identifies this person, the entire marketing strategy shifts to focus disproportionately on them. Jennifer described a perfect example involving a group of 4 women who visited together twice a month, always on Saturday afternoons. The system tracked them over about 5 months and determined that one particular woman, based on behavioral patterns and how the others physically oriented toward her, was the decision maker for the group. This woman started receiving significantly better promotional offers than her friends, better room rates, higher free play amounts, priority event invitations. The strategy was transparent to Jennifer and her team, even if it wasn't obvious to the players themselves. By giving the influencer better treatment, the casino ensured the entire group would keep returning because she would continue organizing these trips. Former employees report that this social network profiling includes specific designations in the database, with some players literally tagged as a group leader in their profiles, which triggers different marketing algorithms than regular players receive. The multiplier effect is what makes this so valuable to casinos. One player who brings 3 friends represents 4 times the revenue of a solo gambler. According to reports from former marketing staff, Casinos will invest considerably more in retaining a social hub player than they would in a solo player with identical individual gambling metrics. Because the lifetime value calculation includes the entire network that person influences, but wait until you hear what happens when you stop visiting the casino entirely. The next profiling method reveals why you get those perfectly timed mailers just when you're starting to forget about gambling, and the psychological precision of these reactivation campaigns is going to disturb you. And if you think casinos forget about you when you stop visiting, you're absolutely wrong. Here's what they're really doing behind the scenes, and this comes directly from Lisa, a former direct marketing manager who spent 6 years running player reactivation campaigns for a major casino corporation. Lisa described her role with a mixture of pride in the technical sophistication and discomfort with the psychological manipulation. Her entire job was managing what the industry calls dormancy detection systems, which are algorithms specifically designed to identify the exact moment when a player stops visiting and then deploy precisely calibrated incentives to bring them back. According to insider data Lisa had access to, most major casinos have automated trigger points programmed at 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days of inactivity, with each threshold activating progressively more valuable offers based on your historical worth to the property. Profiling method number 8, the dormancy detection system. Here's how it works in practice. The casino's database is constantly monitoring every player account for visit frequency patterns. When you've been coming weekly and you suddenly don't show up for a week, the system notices but doesn't act yet because short-term variance is normal. But when you cross that 30-day threshold without a visit, especially if you'd been a regular player, the algorithm categorizes you as at risk and automatically generates what Lisa called a win-back offer. This isn't random. The value of the offer is calculated based on your lifetime theoretical loss to the casino, which is a statistical measure of how much money you're worth to them over time. A player who typically loses $300 per visit gets a different offer than someone who loses $50 per visit, even if they've both been absent for the same amount of time. Lisa shared a case that demonstrates exactly how calculated this becomes. There was a man in his early 50s who'd been visiting the casino almost every weekend for about 7 months. His pattern was consistent, reliable, predictable. Then he stopped coming. No explanation, no communication. He just disappeared from the database. At exactly 31 days of absence, the system automatically generated and mailed him an offer for $50 in free play with a personalized message about how much they missed seeing him. The man returned the following weekend, used his free play, and ended up staying for 4 hours and losing nearly $600. He'd stopped visiting originally because he'd had a particularly bad loss and decided he needed a break from gambling. The casino's perfectly timed offer arrived just as his emotional memory of that loss was starting to fade, and the free $50 reframed his return as getting something valuable rather than going back to the place where he'd lost money. The psychology behind these dormancy triggers is ruthlessly effective. According to documentation that former employees have shared, casinos have refined these reactivation timeframes over years of testing and data analysis. 30 days is long enough that you're starting to break the habit of regular visits, but not so long that you've completely moved on. 60 days means you're seriously disengaged and requires a stronger incentive. 90 days typically indicates you've made a conscious decision to stop gambling, which means the offer has to be substantial enough to overcome whatever resistance made you quit. Lisa explained that the offer values aren't arbitrary. They're calculated using complex formulas that balance the cost of the incentive against the statistical likelihood of reactivation and the projected revenue from your return visits. Former employees report that these win-back offers typically cost the casino between 8 and 15% of what they expect to make back from your reactivated play. But here's where the dormancy tracking becomes even more disturbing. And this is something that multiple former marketing executives have confirmed from different casino operations. Some casino corporations don't just track when you stop visiting. They purchase supplementary data from third-party brokers about major life events that might correlate with increased gambling behavior or sudden access to money. Lisa admitted that during her time in casino marketing, her department regularly purchased data set that included information about tax refund season timing, inheritance distributions, divorce filings, retirement account distributions, and social security payment schedules. This data wasn't attached to specific individuals in a way that violated privacy laws, but it allowed casinos to time their campaigns around moments when their player base was statistically likely to have access to discretionary funds. Profiling method number 9, the life event monitoring. Here's a specific example of how this works. Every February and March, Lisa's department would deploy what they internally called the spring campaign, which was specifically timed to coincide with tax refund season. Players who'd been dormant for 30 to 90 days would receive mailers with messaging like, treat yourself or you deserve a spring getaway, with significantly higher free play offers than they'd received during other months. These weren't random timing decisions. According to documentation Lisa had access to, the casino knew from years of data analysis that tax refund season produced measurable increases in gambling frequency and average bet sizes across their player base. The campaign ROI during these months was consistently higher than standard reactivation offers sent at other times of year. Former employees report feeling increasingly uncomfortable with how precisely these campaigns targeted financial vulnerability. Lisa described another pattern that stuck with her. There was a retiree, probably in his late 60s, who'd been a regular player for years. He visited like clockwork, always around the third week of every month. The marketing team eventually realized his visits coincided almost exactly with Social Security payment dates. When this man went dormant for 2 months, likely because of health issues or family circumstances, the reactivation offer he received was specifically timed to arrive in the mail during the week his Social Security payment would be deposited. This wasn't a coincidence. The system had identified his visit pattern correlation with benefit payments and timed the offer accordingly. He returned within days of receiving that mailer and resumed his regular pattern. He never knew that the casino had effectively mapped his fixed income schedule and used it to optimize their marketing timing. But perhaps the most ethically troubling example Lisa shared involved life events like divorce. Casino marketing departments have access to public records data, and some properties were using divorce filing information to identify players who might be experiencing major life transitions. According to documentation from former employees, there were specific campaigns designed around the psychological vulnerability of major life disruptions. One woman who'd been a moderate regular player went through a divorce, and within 45 days of the filing becoming public record, she received a mailer with messaging about treating yourself and moving forward with a room package and elevated free play offer. The timing wasn't random. Former employees stated they felt genuinely uncomfortable with how these campaigns targeted people during obvious periods of emotional vulnerability. But the data showed these offers had higher response rates than standard reactivation campaigns. So the practice continued. And now we're getting to the final profiling, into the method. And this one represents where casino technology is heading in the next 5 years. What's being developed right now in terms of predictive behavior modeling should genuinely concern everyone who gambles because it's going to make everything we've discussed so far look primitive by comparison. And now for the final profiling method, and this one should genuinely worry everyone because it represents the cutting edge of where casino surveillance and marketing technology is heading over the next 5 years. This comes from Brian, a former data analyst who spent 4 years building machine learning models for a casino technology company that supplies player tracking systems to properties across North America. Brian left the industry specifically because he couldn't reconcile what he was creating with his own ethical boundaries. And what he described about predictive behavior modeling reveals a future where casinos won't just respond to your patterns, they'll anticipate your decisions before you make them. Profiling method number 10, the predictive behavior modeling. Brian explained that the systems he helped develop use artificial intelligence to analyze years of aggregated player data, identifying patterns that human analysts would never notice. These machine learning algorithms process millions of data points, tracking correlations between hundreds of variables like weather conditions, day of week, local event schedules, gas prices, your historical win-loss patterns, time since last visit, recent bet sizing trends, and even broader economic indicators. The system then generates what Brian called predictive confidence scores for individual players, essentially calculating the probability that you'll visit the casino on any given day, what time you're likely to arrive, how long you'll probably stay, and approximately how much you'll lose. According to technical documentation Brian worked with, the most sophisticated versions of these systems can predict your next major gambling session with 73% accuracy up to 2 weeks in advance. Here's a specific case that demonstrates just how precise this becomes. Brian described a woman whose gambling patterns had been tracked for approximately 3 years. She wasn't a weekly regular, her visits were more sporadic, maybe twice a month, sometimes 3 times. Occasionally, she'd go 6 weeks without visiting. To human observers, her patterns seemed random, but the predictive algorithm identified correlations that revealed she was actually highly predictable. She was more likely to visit on overcast days than sunny days. She almost never came during weeks when major local sporting events were happening. Her visits increased in frequency during months when gas prices were below a certain threshold. She was more likely to come on Thursdays than any other weekday. When all these variables aligned, her predictive score would spike above 80%, meaning the system was more than 80% confident she would visit within the next 48 hours. On one particular Thursday in October, with overcast weather forecasted and gas prices down, the woman received a targeted email offer that morning, with free play valid only that day and the next. She visited that same evening. She had no idea that the casino's algorithm had essentially predicted her behavior with greater accuracy than she could have predicted it herself. This is the technology that's being deployed right now, and according to former employees who've worked with these systems, it's improving rapidly. But here's where it takes an even darker turn. Brian revealed that some of the advanced models he worked on included what the development team called intervention modeling, which was designed to identify players exhibiting behavioral patterns associated with problem gambling. The stated purpose was player protection, the idea that casinos could identify at-risk individuals and intervene before they experienced serious harm. Brian was initially excited about this application because it seemed like the technology could actually help people. But as the project developed, he became increasingly disturbed by what intervention actually meant in practice. The system could identify with reasonable accuracy when a player was entering a dangerous pattern, chasing losses, visiting with increasing frequency, betting beyond their normal levels, playing during hours that suggested neglecting other responsibilities. But the intervention protocols being developed weren't about helping these players stop gambling. They were about what Brian's managers called sustainable engagement, which meant keeping the player gambling at a level that was profitable for the casino, but not so destructive that the player would hit bottom and self-exclude permanently. The algorithm would actually recommend reducing certain aggressive marketing toward players it identified as at highest risk, not because the casino cared about their well-being, but because a player who loses everything and self-excludes represents lost future revenue. Former employees report that these intervention systems were being framed internally as responsible gaming initiatives, but the actual goal was optimizing long-term extractable value from vulnerable players. So let's bring all of this together because what we've covered represents the complete picture of how modern casinos profile every person who walks through their doors. From the moment you touch your first machine, they're analyzing your hesitation patterns and categorizing your player type. When you insert that player's card, they're tracking 15 to 20 different behavioral metrics in real time. When you deviate from your normal betting patterns, floor managers receive alerts to intervene during your most vulnerable moments. When you hit a jackpot, they're instantly calculating your lifetime value to determine how aggressively to keep you on property. They're monitoring your session length to interrupt you right before you'd naturally quit. Some properties are using facial recognition to detect your emotional state. They're mapping your social networks to identify who influences your gambling decisions. When you stop visiting, automated systems deploy precisely timed offers to reactivate you. They're purchasing data about your life events to target you when you're most likely to have money or emotional vulnerability. And the newest systems are using artificial intelligence to predict your behavior weeks in advance with disturbing accuracy. This information comes directly from former casino directors, marketing executives, surveillance operators, and data analysts who've worked inside these systems. Every single action you take in a casino is tracked, analyzed, and weaponized to keep you gambling longer and betting more than you intended. Now, I'm not standing here telling you to never gamble. That's not my message. But what I am saying is that you need to understand the staggering asymmetry of information working against you. The casino knows things about your behavior that you don't know about yourself. They've spent millions of dollars developing systems that exploit human psychology at an industrial scale. Knowledge is power, and now that you understand these 10 profiling methods, they lose at least some of their effectiveness because you can recognize when you're being manipulated. If this information was valuable to you, if learning about these systems changed how you think about casino gambling, then you need to subscribe to this channel right now. Former casino insiders are coming forward. People who've spent years inside these operations are finally speaking out, and we're sharing information that casinos have spent fortunes trying to keep quiet. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever received a casino offer that seemed almost too perfectly timed? Have you noticed hosts appearing at your machine, right? After you increased your bets? Share your experiences because the more we understand these systems collectively, the less power they have over us individually. And in my next video, I'm going to reveal the specific players' card myths that casinos desperately want you to keep believing. Because what you think you know about comp points and how they're calculated is almost certainly wrong. Trust me, the reality behind casino loyalty programs is going to shock you even more than what we've covered today.